It's hard to talk about what I was trying to capture overall with the tone and feel of WALL-E without mentioning a bit about my past, which was that I was a usher in an art house theater that was very local and small. And so I saw a lot of art house cinema that I would have never chosen to otherwise. And being educated and entertained in ways I did not expect. And most of them are very adult, and I don't mean that in a risque way, but like complex issues about life and not a lot of happy endings. And I just knew that it was different. It was different than when I was going to the cinema complex on the weekend and I was seeing Raiders of the Lost Ark or Road Warrior or Tootsie. I was still seeing great movies and being incredibly satisfied, but it was a different thing. It was life affirming. There was a tone that I was not getting out of Hollywood. And one felt big and the other felt small. And they felt, and that wasn't a negative and a positive, it was that they were fulfilling in very, very different ways. The thing that I have to recall is that Toy Story was also, for all of us, our first film. Some of us had worked in part on somebody else's feature, but I hadn't, Pete Docter hadn't. So we were very much going through film school at the same time. So we just wanted to play ball well. We were very frustrated with animation at the time because it was seen as a babysitter. It was seen as a genre. It was seen as a category in and of itself as opposed to just a style, a medium, a way that you could tell any story. And we wanted to be able to tell a story that was as mature and as challenging and as engaging as all our favorite films that we saw as adults. We wanted to just be in the club of movies. I think the thing that is unique to my journey from Toy Story on was that I discovered I was not bad at writing, screenwriting in particular. And I was just as hungry to tell stories as a filmmaker, but I wanted to learn how my heroes did it too. I came into understanding scripts about the same time as understanding the names of the screenwriters of my favorite scripts. So I really went for my favorite movies and I started to connect the dots. I started to recognize the credits of, I seem to love these two movies, and those are both written by Bo Goldman. This one's written by Scott Frank. This one's written by Alan Ball. This one's written by Steve Zaillian and Frank Pearson. And that's when I started to go back and then try to find any script that they had written and break down how they worked, how they got that magic captured on the page. So I spent that next 9 years, not only being a party to these films being made and learning that way, but I was learning privately on how to tell them better and just the DNA of drama. It must be like a musician finding out like how few notes can I get away with to make an infectious tune. And that's the best way I can explain it is there was such a fear and such a leap of faith that I took on what I barely accomplished on Nemo. It gave me the guts to go, okay, now I want to strip away more notes and see if I really do understand the chemistry of dramatic tension. The spark of the idea of the format of WALL-E came from watching a lot of foreign films in that time. I remember saying to somebody that, I can't watch a foreign film dubbed.
Pour Madame de la Plante?
Ah oui, Madame la Marquise, j'allais oublier. Pas de thé, du café.
Et pour le général, un rond de citron dans de l'eau chaude.
Bien, Madame la Marquise.
Je sais, l'artisme.
I rely so much on the acting of the source voice.
Pour André Giolieu.
And the minute I said that, I remember thinking, wow, I wonder if you could make a foreign film of a foreign language that nobody knows, and it would cut through to everybody. And that's really the genesis of WALL-E. It wasn't, can I make a silent movie? Because there's nothing silent about WALL-E. It's very dependent on audio. And I wanted the entire palette of what you get from watching a foreign film, but the subtitles just aren't on. That's the DNA of film. like if the sound goes off, the film keeps going. And you keep taking in a ton of information. And so we just had to make that obvious. But there was still a formal, like, prove it on the page, prove it as a 3-act structure. And Steve Jobs would be brought in once we thought there was a there. You know, once we all said, oh, I would want to make this, well, then let's make sure Steve feels the same. He's the one with the checkbook, you know? So what I showed Steve was a story reel, which had all these selections I had made from movies. All of them were, for very different reasons, keeping you very engaged cinematically, keeping you incredibly invested in the drama of the scene and wanting to know, having to know what will happen next. And particularly, if I've picked the right scenes, what will the character choose to do next? Because that's the great brass ring. First, I showed the one that was the touchstone for me, which was the Black Stallion. There's the scene where he's on the beach and they've been wary of each other, and suddenly they're in the same spot and he gets the guts to try to feed him with a leaf. That tension is so palpable. It has all the ingredients that great drama does. Like, that horse could kill him. You realize that without it being called attention to, it's under tremendous stakes. And it's such a simple, innocent desire that's masking all that of just, I want to feed the animal. And I remember thinking, oh, the power of a laser dot on the floor. And I realized, I bet you could make a whole scene out of just tracking a laser dot. And that suddenly felt like, oh, that's the arena that the Black Stallion moment is in. And I think that makes you appreciate all the other elements of filmmaking more. And that the job you have to do, if you take out such a major element as dialogue, the other elements have to do the rest of the lifting. My life as a dog and the universal language of accidentally wetting your pants and the shame of your siblings. And so it's learning also that the specificity of something holds so much. I mean, that's one of the things I remember Spielberg saying to me after he saw WALL-E. He just couldn't get over the details. And I remember that was a big lesson I was learning, all of us were learning at Pixar as we got more and more into controlling what was in the shots, was the more we could have a story and a specificity to the world and a history to these things, it would be felt, it would be seen. Lost in Translation, this was easy stuff. Visual gags are easy to think they're going to be powerful in silent cinema, because that's what the first thing you think of when you think of Chaplin or Keaton. But to see it in modern times with Bill Murray and the elliptical, you can easily forget how much you can milk a simple situation. Even though it's my bread and butter, you fall into the trap of overcomplicating things, as opposed to just, no, strip it away. All I have is this machine and me and a lot of time. And you just think smarter. The fact that you could carry high stakes, real drama, and humor all at once, it was just this beautiful balance. Can I have the emotion? Can I have the drama? Can I have the stakes? But can I have the humor and the wonder? Like, can I have it all? The other thing I did show, because I didn't want to assume Steve was a sci-fi nerd like the rest of us, was a little collage of what I liked and what I didn't like about the world of robots in cinema. And since that was a good thing to just inform my crew, I thought it would be a good thing to inform Steve, because robots can mean a lot of things, and I didn't think he was an aficionado on the subject. So I got Steve on board and to understand sort of the playground we were going to be in. But there were films that I was specifically inspired by. Red Balloon, Close Encounters, and Gallipoli were the holy trinity of what I wanted the audience to feel like if WALL-E was completed correctly. All three of the films have a main character that's yearning to break from their circumstances. And I didn't think about this consciously at first. I just remember those kept coming up as I was developing the nascent idea of WALL-E. But it's interesting when I look back and I go, oh, one was when I was 5, one was when I was 12, and one when I was 18. So clearly there's an arc to these formative moments cinematically for me. And Red Balloon, I saw when I was in kindergarten, and I thought it was practically a documentary of my life. I was in a small sea village. I was a runt. I was picked on, and I couldn't stop imagining and anthropomorphizing anything that I saw. And so to see this red balloon just simply follow a boy down a street, I was enraptured. The thing that drew me to look back at Red Balloon for WALL-E was that you couldn't make it simpler. It is a red sphere with a dangly piece of rope. Yet, how many emotions and how many attitudes did that red balloon go through? It was cautious, it was angry, it was curious and mischievous, and it never did anything except move in space. So it just shows you the power of how you can infer things when you literally have an object with nothing on it. And it's so endearing. Like, to me, again, the intoxicating thing is not so much look at what it's doing intellectually. It's like, look at how you're feeling. And so much of it's because of what you've projected onto this simplistic orb, you know? Then in Close Encounters, I remember my mother crying because she was sort of a frustrated stay-at-home mom that was a frustrated artist, actress that didn't really get to realize her dreams. And so I think there was something about Richard Dreyfuss getting to get away from the kids and go up in space. But I just remember the thrill of being scared and in awe at the same time. I don't think there's a better film that captures the potential complexity of wonder than that film, at least for me. But there was always that delight and that impishness and joy that kind of would sneak its way in, and it was always visually engaging. I'm so connected to feeling before thought. And so I just go, there's a feeling I had in that film that I would just love to carry for WALL-E. And then Gallipoli is a little bit more of a leap. I know I want to go into film at that point when that movie comes out. I think it's 81. And I'm starting to appreciate the nuts and bolts behind storytelling and filmmaking in a very rudimentary way. I think I watch that film once a year. As a matter of fact, I probably watch the beginning of Gallipoli more often than I watch the whole film because I get so satisfied so quickly. These are simple things that you start to understand, but they're the perfect choice for the narrative of that moment. The coach on the right side of frame staring at him, the runner on the left side of frame staring, and you feel the distance, and then the details of just the foot going into the dirt, and then the timing of just suddenly going wide to let him just run. These are all things that like kind of almost seem cliche when you talk about them now, but at the time they were revelatory for me. And it still reminds me that there's always a best choice for how to tell something. I knew I was going into silent movie territory with WALL-E, and particularly Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin. And I knew that I needed to up my grammar on silent movies and not assume anything. Keaton was really the target. It was really the bullseye that we found, like, that's the match. And so we got so much out of so many of his films. Our co-writer, Jim Reardon, is very much a silent movie aficionado, and I remember him showing me Steamboat Bill Jr. and commenting on how great that hat moment was because Buster never changes, just the hats change. Yet you get sort of an endless variety of entertainment. And it's just the simple projection that a different hat does. That was, I think, the scene that made me completely commit and trust that we could get away with a faceless character that just had eyes. Because basically those binoculars are just droopy eyes. They're very sad in the same way that Buster Keaton's very sad. And they don't really change. Like, I can iris in and out so it gives the illusion of eyebrows, and I can make sadder or level.
Even? Wally?
But the power of what can be done around that was proven to me by the hat scene. And I think there's something, frankly, more, in a weird way, I don't know if this is the right word, sophisticated about the challenge of never changing your face under any circumstance, yet completely being engaged. And I think it draws you in just a little bit more, just because there's just that much less to go by. Sherlock Jr. is just a clever, clever film that just constantly breaks the fourth wall. It's probably one of his more slick films that just plays with cinema and the power of the camera and early visual effects. So it's constantly clever. But there's a scene where you realize all the intentions and all the successes or losses are told sort of through whether he's holding hands or not.
When time runs out.
And at the time, we were realizing that that was the only way we were going to be able to convey success and a goal of love with Wally was the hand-holding. Also, I just love Keaton's funky way to deal with his body that just was hilarious. And his woozy kiss, when he gets kissed by his loved one and then just kind of saunters away. That just, to me, was just encapsulated everything. That's just how I wanted you to feel about Wally throughout the entire film. It's like he's just that love-struck, that innocent, that pure. Go West really enforced the attraction and the futility of love. Falling in love with a cow and just the little tells of being smitten. It's the oddest love story. And it's just the traditional pulling the thorn from the lion's paw and suddenly kismet, and I just love the simplicity of that and the oddity of it. And that's sort of the same thing with Wally. Also in Go West is the country boy going into the city. And that's very much was a parallel to what was Wally. Wally was all alone in his little Hoboken world, and then he went and suddenly he's in the busy, busy, busy world. And we wanted it to be slightly jarring and off-putting, and how much entertainment you could make out of just being against the sea of people. The industrial age is still finishing. It's so current then. And that's what Charlie Chaplin and Keaton were dealing with.
Just coming through loose on bench 5. Attention, foreman.
Modern Times is about the most literal of an association because of exactly the title, of just the modernization of everything, the automation. Seeing Charlie get caught up in the eating machine, particularly, I remember feeling that was a direct sort of inspiration when we brought Wally down to the broken robot repair ward and sort of getting caught up in the mechanization of all of that. He's fighting the machine. And I know it's odd that I have a machine fighting the machine, but I think we humanize Wally so much by the time he gets to the Axiom, and we see the Axiom and anything in it as the threat of the bad side of technology and the automation and laziness of what it can bring. And so we root for him in the same way that we root for Charlie. Charlie Chaplin is a romantic and an imp. That's kind of his playground. Chaplin's Sunny Side definitely inspired the space dance between Wally and Eve, but I have to go outside of the world of silent cinema and give acknowledgement to the dancing scene from The Gate of Orsay. That's also sort of a dance of love. There are two different reasons. One, it was just the humor and the entertainment value in Chaplin of just how he dances like a dork, basically, amongst all these nymphs and these pretty women. And then you have storytelling with Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, where they start out narratively, she doesn't want to have anything to do with him. And so you get the arc of the narrative through the dance. And that was, I think, the most attractive to us because we're storytelling, zealots, at Pixar. We would like to use every part of the buffalo to be moving the drama forward. So to have an example of that through dance was inspiring for when we're out in space, how can we move things forward with the relationship? And finally, City Lights is kind of, at least among my peers, seen as the greatest romance in film, or the most impactful, particularly because of its ending. So it was a kind of obvious choice to look at for WALL-E since we knew we were making a romance. And the funny thing is that one of the first things that gave me some courage was the opening with the politicians, and that they're actually, he used sound to amplify character. And that the choice of a kazoo gave that sort of droning tone that you would feel when somebody's going on and on. So I thought, oh God, that really kind of is proving not just that we should use sound for inflection, but the right sound tells you character.
Directive?
Because that's always what you're trying to go for, is how quickly can you get somebody across in what they say or how they say it or what they sound like, how they move. Then the ending was just so powerful. And I don't think I was aware at the time that we'd be so inversely literal to that in the ending of our film. And it's funny to look back and compare. I just remember going, I want the connection not to happen or be fully fulfilled until the very end of the movie. Because they're going to get together. So it's like, how do you make that something special?
Eva? WALL-E? Eva?
You can feel the baton pass of what inspired you in film, and that you hopefully are taking a certain element of, adopting it as your own, putting your DNA on it, your thumbprint, and then hopefully now passing it on to the next person watching it, that'll go on and do the same.